Morning, Mike, or afternoon, Mike. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
You bet. So to start with, it is National Ag Day. In agriculture, a huge part of Mississippi's economy. I think the largest industry, if I'm not mistaken.
Mississippi's largest industry that contributes to our economy, for sure.
Yeah. 39% of total output is the last figure I think I saw.
It's around a third of the state's output.
Okay. Well, that's obviously a lot. We are blessed here in Mississippi with fantastic soil and water and of course the catfish industry, which I think is often overlooked, but that has come about the last 35 years or so, and huge deal. We've got a lot of acres underwater in the state of Mississippi.
So catfish is our one commodity that we're number one in the nation on. Poultry is our number one industry here from an agricultural standpoint, but we lead the nation in catfish production for sure. And
the technology in operating a fishery, the hatchery, the fishery, the processing, it's come a long way, hasn't it, Mike?
Everything in farming is coming a long way. The technology in the cotton pickers, the combines, the tractors that we run to the processing plants, you would be amazed if you got a chance to see it.
Well, in fact, I have somewhat kept up with that being in the technology industry, and as part of my kind of overall technology presentation, had a couple of slides about John Deere. Most people know of John Deere, and you think of them as being a sort of a legacy implement manufacturer. But when you look underneath the covers, they're really a technology company when it comes down to it, and making massive investments in technology. And all of that, of course, makes the farmers way more productive, improves our yields, and cuts down on disease and other kind of pests, and also helps us conserve the land so that we can get more out of it. I mean, so a lot of advances in the agricultural space, and I'm just going to say are a function of free market capitalism in this country and what that's done for us. And certainly Mississippi has benefited to a great extent on that as well.
Certainly our farmers have. Deere tells me that they have more IT engineers today than they do mechanical engineers. It's just amazing. A lot of the cost of a new combine, a tractor, cotton picker is in the technology. It's not in the iron itself. You can only attribute so much in the actual materials. It's the smart machine that costs you all this money.
That's fascinating and incredible, and hats off to them for evolving and leveraging technology as a way to include in the products they produce, which we all benefit from. But that's fantastic. So what happens on National Ag Day in particular? How do we recognize and celebrate that here in Mississippi and then nationally?
Well, it's just a day that the National Ag Associations came up with to celebrate the abundance of our agriculture that our farmers are producing around the United States, to educate our population on how their food and fiber is produced, the value of the essential role of agriculture in maintaining a strong economy, and most importantly, just appreciating the hard work of the hardworking American farmer.
Yeah, and so critical, and something unique to this country, is it not, is the farming industry itself, the agricultural industry. I don't think there's another country that comes close to equaling the United States in that respect.
Not in productivity. Our farmers here are on the cutting edge of technology, and our soils are extremely rich, especially here in Mississippi. So you add it all up with a hardworking group of people, and it comes up to being one of America's bright, shining stars.
And the farming industry is also not exempt from the challenges of labor and talent, is it?
No, it's an extreme labor shortage now in the United States for labor on farms. We're just not attracting the labor force back to the farms that we need to produce our products. A lot of times our markets are increasing overseas for things that need further processing, and we just don't have the labor force there to get all of it done.
So a lot of times when you think about the folks that come across the border, I think the common perception is that these illegal immigrants end up on America's farms or in the agricultural processing plants. It's no secret we had an issue with that a couple of years ago with Mike Hurst, U.S. Attorney, that I guess was involved in ICE and dealing with some of the issues there. But it seems like we've got to come up with something that makes sense. We've got, I think, in general, an American workforce that not crazy about working and doing a lot of those jobs, and so they get backfilled because the producers really don't have a choice. They can't function without labor.
We've got to have a updated legal guest working program that works for farmers and works for the guest workers. We're not talking about illegal immigration. This is a whole different concept. It's some bills moving through Congress. It's always so tough to get anything passed on those. But we will either import our labor or import our food. And I can tell you, Gerard, you don't want imported food from around the world. It's not inspected. It's not raised to our standards. You want your food raised by an American farmer.
Well, and on top of that, Mike, I get worried about our adversaries becoming the supplier of our food and them starving us. I mean, that may sound kind of radical, but I don't think there's any limits that some of these foes have on the global stage. We're already exposed to concerns about the majority of our antibiotics being produced in China, and China's no friend of America unless they can get rich off of us somehow. But I get concerned about that, so we've got to protect that. We can't rely on countries other than ours supplying us with the food we need to exist as a society.
A country that cannot feed itself cannot defend itself. That's absolute proven fact. So we can do that here in the United States. We just got to have a labor force to be able to do it with.
And we're good guys, as we always have been, and I support that as an American, in that we feed a fair amount of the rest of the world on top of ourselves. Is that not correct, Mike?
Absolutely. Our farmers are so productive here in the United States that we export a tremendous amount of ag products around the world.
And we've got to keep that going. So are you working with our delegation in Washington on this, Mike, to try to come up with something that makes sense?
Well, it's a big issue for American Farm Bureau, our parent organization in Washington, D.C. There's some bills up there moving right now, and one that moved through the House that we didn't support, but we're going to work on it on the Senate side to try to come up with some reasonable reform to try to get a guest worker program that's workable. But it's always so tough. You need bipartisan support for something like that, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Well,
given that there's so many that are crossing the border, and we're told by the Biden administration that a lot of those folks are seeking asylum from what is oppression in their own nations, I can't imagine how they wouldn't be attracted to the possibility of gainful employment in the United States.
As long as they're legal.
As long as they're legal, right. Yeah, and I'm not suggesting illegals taking gainful employment, but if we can't get Americans to go out and do those jobs, and if that's because they're moving up the employment economic food chain, well, maybe that's okay. That's fine. I mean, that's just the way markets work. And we got to support that and come up with something. Now, what about legislation that's going on down there at the Capitol here in Mississippi? What do you got your eye on, Mike? What's happened during this session, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, I guess the income tax plan is something that you're covering a lot.
Yep.
We hope that the conversation will continue. We have voiced our concern with agriculture being included in that on the tax increase side of things, and our elected leadership has listened to that. So we'll see where that goes. I think you may know more about it than I do, but it looks like right now maybe a study committee for this summer, and